The air crackles before the words even land. Voices blur together, sharp and restless, each one fighting to be louder than the last. The committee room feels less like governance and more like a storm, thunder made of microphones and impatience. Somewhere between the raised voices and the flurry of gestures, single tone cuts through it all, measured, calm, unflinching. Your time's up. The words fall like the drop of a gavel. Silence ripples outward, uneasy, electric. For a split second, no one breathes. Jasmine Crockett freezes mid-sentence, her hands suspended in motion. Across the table, Pam Bondi's eyes hold steady, her expression a masterclass in restraint. It isn't anger, it's control, sharp as glass. Cold as resolve. Freeze-frame. The narrator's voice lowers, intimate, almost conspiratorial. How did it come to this? This wasn't just a clash of personality. It was the sound of two Americas colliding. One built on the need to be heard, loud, raw, righteous. The other built on the power of composure, quiet, precise, deliberate. A flicker of cameras, the hum of whispered commentary. Someone mutters, "She really said that?" Another, "She didn't even raise her voice." Outside these walls, millions will soon argue about this very moment. Some will call it disrespect. Others will call it discipline. But in here, right now, before the flood of reactions and retweets, there's only silence. The kind that feels heavy with meaning. The narrator returns, voice rising with the tempo of a pulse. This was more than a shutdown. It was a message. And it didn't last long, only 30 seconds. But it changed everything. But to understand the 30 seconds that silenced an entire chamber, we have to rewind the clock. Morning light cut through the high windows of the chamber, slicing gold across the oak tables. The nameplates gleamed, microphones waited, and yet the room felt ready to ignite. Everyone knew today wouldn't be routine. The topic, an investigation tangled in ethics. Image and power had already set social media ablaze before the first gavel struck. At one end sat Jasmine Crockett, posture forward, eyes bright with the fire of conviction. Her supporters called her fearless, the voice of those tired of being talked over. She wore that expectation like armor. Every phrase was sharpened for a headline, every pause deliberate, a rhythm made for viral replay. Across from her, Pam Bondi leaned back in quiet contrast. No theatrics, no flourish. Notes aligned neatly before her, pen balanced between her fingers. She listened more than she spoke, a presence that seemed to calm and provoke at once. The contrast was cinematic, heat versus ice, urgency versus patience. Whispers rippled from the gallery. "This one's going to blow." Cameras zoomed tighter. A journalist scribbled a note, "To Americas." One table the hearing began like any other. Procedural statements, rehearsed gratitude, polite disagreement. But beneath the surface, tension coiled. Each witness seemed to know that today's testimony wasn't about evidence. It was about identity. Who gets to speak? Who gets to command the room? Who defines what respect looks like in modern America? Crockett's words came fast, edged with moral thunder. "Some of us are tired of decorum being used as a shield," she said, the tone daring anyone to interrupt. The air thickened. Across the table, Bondi's pen stopped mid-note. Two women, two strategies, each believing hers was the language of truth. It was more than a hearing. It was a mirror held up to the country itself. And then came the spark. One question, one interruption that changed the tone of the entire day. Before the headlines, before the viral clips with millions of views and millions more opinions, Jasmine Crockett was already a storm gathering strength. Born into a family that taught her to never sit quietly when something felt wrong, she carried that lesson like fire in her chest. Law school gave her the language of justice. Activism gave her the rhythm. By the time she stepped into politics, now her voice could fill a room before she even spoke. She was electric on a stage, every gesture punctuated, every line delivered like the closing argument of a lifetime. When she spoke about inequality, the crowd roared. When she called out hypocrisy, social feeds lit up with hashtags and admiration. For a generation that craved defiance, she became a symbol of it. But with every viral moment came another shadow, another clip, another clash, another reminder that fire can warm or burn. She was the one unafraid to name names, to challenge power directly, to make the air in a room vibrate with tension. And people loved her for it, till they did. Quick cuts a late-night interview where she interrupts a host mid-question. A rally where her passion spills over into shouting. A committee exchange that ends not in persuasion, but exhaustion. Every scene adds to the mythology. Crockett, the fighter. Crockett, the unfiltered truth-teller. Crockett, the headline. Her supporters saw courage. Her critics saw chaos. Both were right in their own way. The truth lived somewhere between applause and alarm. Because behind the firebrand persona was a woman carrying the pressure of representing millions who felt unheard. To back down, even once, might look like betrayal. To stay composed might feel like silence. That's the paradox of power in the modern era. When every sentence is a soundbite, emotion becomes both fuel and trap. And Crockett, for all her brilliance, often mistook volume for victory. Still, something magnetic about her defiance. She walked into every chamber like a declaration, "I belong here, whether you like it or not." That confidence, sometimes sharp enough to cut, made her unforgettable. In another time, she might have been praised for her conviction. But this was an era where every gesture could be clipped, captioned, and weaponized within minutes. She knew the risks. She took them anyway. Her staff used to say they could tell when a moment would explode online. "Watch her hands," one joked. "When she starts pointing, Twitter starts trending." It was part of her rhythm, her performance, her truth. But even performers need balance, and on that particular day, balance was the first thing to break. There had been whispers that the committee would be contentious. Tempers would flare. Still, few expected Crockett to go toe-to with Pam Bondi, a woman known not for theatrics, but for strategy. The matchup felt like a script no one had written, but everyone wanted to watch. By the time Crockett entered the room, the energy followed her like static. She didn't walk. She arrived. The journalists took note. The cameras adjusted focus. She smiled faintly. She understood the theater of politics better than most. What she didn't know was that across the table sat someone who operated in a different register entirely. Crockett fought in lightning. Bondi waited in silence. Crockett provoked. Bondi planned. One burned bright, the other burned steady. And that day, those two forces were destined to collide. But across from her sat someone who had spent decades mastering the art of control, and who was about to use it like a weapon. Before the cameras and the viral moments, Pam Bondi was already a fixture in the quiet corridors of power, the kind where discipline speaks louder than volume. She wasn't the loudest in the room. She didn't need to be. Her reputation was built on something sturdier than charisma, precision, the kind of mind that doesn't rush to respond, but calculates 3 steps ahead. As Florida's Attorney General, she earned her name through methodical wins, cases that stretched months, sometimes years, each one demanding patience that few could sustain. While others chased headlines, she chased results. In courtrooms filled with pressure and politics, she learned how to let chaos collapse on itself. When tempers flared, she took notes. When voices rose, she looked for the opening in the noise. That instinct, the calm amid crisis, became her quiet signature. She wasn't always understood for it. To some, her restraint looked like detachment. To others, her measured tone felt too polished, too careful for an age that rewarded outrage. But those who worked beside her knew the truth. Bondi's calm wasn't weakness. It was armor. Every pause was tactical. Every silence intentional. Clips of her from years prior still circulate, facing off with hostile interviewers, standing unshaken in pressed ambushes, her expression as even as if she were reading a weather report. A reporter once asked how she stayed so composed under fire. She smiled lightly. "You don't need to raise your voice when you know where the truth is." Her philosophy was simple. In the theater of politics, self-control is strategy. Let others waste energy proving they care. She preferred to show it by staying unbreakable. It wasn't charisma that drew people in. It was consistency. Behind that poise, though, was purpose. She had seen how emotion could cloud judgment, how outrage could devour credibility, and though she could wield passion when needed, she learned to temper it with deliberation. To her, composure wasn't just a personal choice, it was a form of respect. Respect for the process, the people, and even her opponents. That's why, when the hearing that would soon define her reputation began, she didn't underestimate her adversary. She watched Jasmine Crockett carefully, every word, every gesture, like a chess player studying openings. Crockett was unpredictable, volatile, magnetic, but Bondi had weathered storms fiercer than soundbites. Those who knew her say she could feel tension before it broke, the way a sailor senses the shift of wind before the first wave hits. And in that chamber, the shift was coming. It wasn't arrogance that steadied her, it was experience. She'd been here before, many times. Public scrutiny, hostile panels, political traps designed to provoke. Bondi knew how to turn heat into clarity, noise into opportunity. As Crockett's voice began to rise, as the room grew dense with energy, Bondi didn't flinch. She waited. Every instinct told her the storm would come to her, and when it did, she would meet it with something stronger than fury. So when the storm broke that afternoon, Bondi didn't flinch. She waited. The air in the chamber grew dense, thick enough to feel. What began as a routine exchange had turned into something volatile. Two opposing forces circling the same question, but speaking entirely different languages. Crockett leaned forward, elbows on the table, her voice sharpening with every syllable. "What we have here," she said, each word striking like flint, "is a pattern, selective outrage dressed up as principle." Bondi didn't move. Her gaze stayed fixed, her tone even. "If we're going to talk about principle," she began, her voice low enough to make the microphone strain, "let's make sure we're using the same definition." A murmur rippled through the gallery. Staffers looked up from their notes. A journalist's pen froze midair. Crockett pressed again, louder this time. "I'm not here to be lectured by someone who—" Bondi raised a hand slightly, just enough to pause the rhythm. "Then perhaps you should stop mistaking disagreement for a lecture." It wasn't just words, it was tempo. Crockett's sentences came fast, unfiltered, emotional. Bondi's responses landed like deliberate drum beats. The contrast pulled the room taut. One running hot, the other cold. From the corner, a young aide shifted in his seat, whispering to another, "She's pushing too hard." Camera zoomed tighter. Viewers watching live felt it, the anticipation of something about to break. Crockett leaned back, then forward again, refusing to yield. "No, what I'm mistaking," she fired back, "is privilege masquerading as patience." The room gasped. Even Bondi's expression flickered for a breath, the faintest acknowledgement of the barb. But just as quickly, she reset. "Words like that," she said, calm, slicing through tension, "say more about your assumptions than about my privilege." A collective hush fell. Crockett's face tightened, the passion that once electrified the room beginning to feel volatile, combustible. Every syllable seemed to push her closer to the edge, where conviction meets impulse. Bondi sat straighter, posture unbending, eyes steady, watching, waiting. Her stillness wasn't passive, it was strategic. She'd seen this pattern before, an opponent. Mistaking motion for momentum, the sound of tapping pens echoed faintly from the back rows. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. The chair of the committee tried to interject, but the moment had already taken on a life of its own. Crockett's voice rose, the rhythm unraveling. "You think decorum protects truth? It protects power." Her words cracked the silence, echoing off the wood-paneled walls. Bondi didn't answer right away. The pause stretched. 2 seconds. 3. Long enough to pull everyone's attention to her. When she finally spoke, her tone was a whisper compared to the storm around her. "Sometimes," she said, "decorum is the only thing that keeps truth from being drowned out by noise." The chamber froze. Cameras caught Crockett blinking, unsure whether to respond or recoil. Somewhere in the audience, someone exhaled audibly. The balance had shifted. What began as confrontation now teetered on collapse. Crockett's fire, once righteous, now flickered dangerously close to losing form. Bondi's restraint, once quiet, now felt commanding. Every political watcher in the room sensed it. That subtle but decisive transfer of power that doesn't happen in votes or rulings, but in tone, and then, in just 30 seconds. Everything changed. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Crockett was mid-sentence, the kind of run-on fury that blurred argument into rhythm. Every gesture sharper, every word hotter. The committee chair tried to interrupt, failed. The air in the chamber shimmered with friction. Then, through the chaos, came the moment. Pam Bondi leaned forward, elbows gently placed on the table, her expression unreadable. The camera zoomed in, her lips parted. No hesitation, no tremor, just clarity. "Your time's up." Her voice didn't rise. It simply cut through. The effect was instant, like glass cracking in silence. Crockett's words stopped midair, half a syllable abandoned between her teeth. The entire room froze, sound drained from it, leaving only the echo of Bondi's tone, calm, final, irrefutable. She didn't add flourish. She didn't need to. Her eyes held steady on Crockett, not defiant, not cruel, just certain. The confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Across the table, Crockett blinked, mouth tightening. A flicker of disbelief crossed her face. This wasn't the pushback she'd expected. Her expression teetered between anger and confusion, searching for footing that no longer existed. Bondi sat back. One breath in, one breath out. The moment stretched, cinematic. Then came the murmurs, soft at first, then swelling. The kind of low, disbelieving sound that spreads when something seismic has just happened. Phones lifted. Cameras refocused. The energy in the room flipped from that stillness. The internet awoke, cut to a flurry of screens. A teenager on TikTok gasping at the clip. A commentator on X typing furiously. Pam Bondi just ended that debate with 6 words. Political podcast replaying the audio with awe. Listen to the tone. She didn't shout. That's why it hit so hard. Hashtags bloomed in real time. Hashtag Bondi moment. Hashtag 30 seconds of fire. Hashtag composure wins. On Instagram. Edit. Appeared within minutes. Slow motion replays with dramatic orchestral music. Captions like "Grace under fire." On Reddit, threads exploded with takes. She didn't just win, she dismantled the noise. Back in the hearing room, Bondi remained still. Crockett shifted papers. eyes downward, the adrenaline that once powered her words, now ebbing into silence. Even the chair hesitated before speaking, as if the natural order of authority had quietly changed hands. For 30 seconds, Bondi owned the moment, not through volume, but through restraint. The kind of mastery that made silence feel louder than shouting ever could. Commentators later tried to define it. Was it strategy, poise, or something deeper? An unspoken understanding that in a world addicted to outrage, composure itself is rebellion? Whatever it was, everyone felt it. A split screen. On one side, the still frame of Bondi, serene, centered, unyielding. On the other, Crockett, mid-reaction, eyes flashing uncertainty. The contrast spoke volumes. No commentary needed. A voiceover would later capture the sentiment best. In a time when everyone's shouting, the calmest person in the room becomes the most dangerous. That was the essence of it. The mic drop wasn't in the words themselves. It was in the stillness that followed. The clip traveled faster than commentary could keep up. Within hours, major outlets clipped and captioned it. Cable panels dissected her tone. Linguists analyzed her cadence. Even comedians joked about the pause. That's not a mic drop, one quipped. That's a soul drop. But beneath the noise, something quieter took hold. Viewers weren't just impressed. They felt something. Validation, relief, the rare satisfaction of seeing dignity win against disruption. For Bondi, it wasn't performance. It was principle manifest. For Crockett, it was a rare defeat not in policy, but in presence. And as the final frame of that 30-second clip froze across screens worldwide, one truth became impossible to ignore. The calmest voice had just become the loudest echo. But as the clip spread across the internet, something unexpected happened. The moment didn't end when the gavel struck. It began. 30 seconds of composure became 30 million views overnight. The clip spread like wildfire, each repost sharpening its meaning, each comment rewriting its legacy. What had started as a heated exchange inside a congressional chamber was now a cultural Rorschach test, projected across every phone screen in America. On TikTok. Creators reenacted the scene with cinematic flair. One user captioned it, "How to win an argument without saying much at all." Another slowed the footage to half speed, syncing Bondi's words with dramatic music, turning restraint into spectacle. On X, the debate was instant and ferocious. "This is what leadership looks like," one post read, earning thousands of likes. A reply shot back, "Leadership, or entitlement dressed as grace?" Threads spiraled, echo chambers clashed, and every corner of the internet seemed to claim the moment as proof of something. Podcasts rushed to frame it. Morning shows debated tone versus truth. Late-night hosts found punchlines in the silence. A prominent political strategist called it a masterclass in timing, proof that stillness can dominate chaos. Another accused Bondi of weaponizing calm to silence passion. Each interpretation said less about her and more about the world dissecting her. In one montage, clips from across platforms flashed, split screens, subtitles, hot takes. The refrain was always the same. What just happened here? Why did this brief interruption resonate like a manifesto? The answer came not from pundits, but from the people. In comment sections and group chats, viewers confessed what they felt watching that clip. Relief. Finally, one wrote, "Someone didn't match the anger. She just ended it." For every accusation of arrogance, there was a quiet thank you. From someone tired of shouting matches posing as politics. The irony was striking. In a digital world built on volume, it was silence that dominated the algorithm. The internet, so accustomed to noise, couldn't stop replaying the absence of it. News anchors called it the Bondi effect. Editorials emerged about decorum, gender, and power. Could calmness be strength? Could control be courage? What did leadership even look like anymore? The conversation spread far beyond the original context, evolving into something philosophical, almost spiritual. And yet for all the celebration, backlash came just as swiftly. Critics accused Bondi of using privilege as a shield, of silencing authentic anger. Hashtag split in two. Hashtag Bondi moment versus hashtag let her speak. Each side saw the same footage and found opposite truths. That polarization, so familiar, so exhausting, became the real mirror. But even in the division, something undeniable lingered. Everyone remembered how it felt. That pause, that stillness, that rare sensation of watching a moment unfold where control triumphed over chaos. Dignity reclaimed center stage. Commentators would later say it wasn't about politics at all, it was about presence. About what happens when someone refuses to play by the rules of outrage and wins anyway. In a world addicted to noise, silence had become the loudest statement. And while the country argued over meaning, Pam Bondi didn't join the discourse. She didn't explain, defend, or celebrate. She simply moved on to her next engagement. The internet still vibrating behind her, because for her, the clip was never about virality. It was about principle, timing, and truth spoken not through volume, but through stillness. But for Bondi, the real victory wasn't viral. It was moral. When the noise finally faded, what lingered wasn't Bondi's words, it was her stillness. The moment that captivated millions wasn't built on outrage or applause, but on control. That composure became a mirror for something larger, something beyond the clash of two voices. In a time when conversations feel like combat, Pam Bondi's restraint became its own kind of rebellion. She didn't win because she spoke louder. She won because she understood that power isn't proven in decibels, it's proven in direction. Every pause, every measured glance, was a statement. Strength doesn't always shout. For many watching, it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about how we carry ourselves when provoked, how we hold our truth when the room demands noise. Her calm wasn't passive. It was purposeful. The kind of calm that comes from knowing who you are before anyone else defines it. Social feeds that once traded insults began sharing quotes instead. Sometimes the loudest voice isn't the strongest. It's the calmest. Teachers posted it. Community leaders repeated it. Even critics admitted, however reluctantly, that something about the moment felt different. It was a reminder of what leadership can look like when it's stripped of theater. Not the performance of outrage, but the presence of principle. Bondi didn't try to humiliate or dominate. She didn't grandstand. She simply enforced a boundary, and in doing so, revealed a kind of strength that doesn't depend on volume or validation. This wasn't about silencing anyone. It was about elevating the conversation, reminding people that dignity has gravity, that respect isn't submission, it's strategy, that sometimes the quietest moment can hold the most power. Viewers who came for the spectacle left with something subtler, a sense that maybe the future of discourse depends not on who can speak longest, but on who can listen deepest. In that sense, Bondi's 30 seconds became more than a viral clip. They became a parable, a story about restraint in an age of reaction, about grace in the face of aggression. She showed that authority need not be loud to be lasting, and that clarity, when spoken softly, can still shake the room as the music swells. The narration fades to a whisper. Sometimes history doesn't remember the shouters. It remembers the ones who stayed still and let the noise collapse on its own. And in the silence that followed, a message echoed far beyond politics. The frame freezes once more. Pam Bondi, composed, steady, unshaken. The echo of that final moment lingers, suspended in digital eternity. Commentators have moved on, timelines have shifted, but that look calm amid chaos still says everything. The narrator's voice returns, low and reflective, in a time when shouting gets headlines. Calm earns history. The screen darkens, and the clip replays in slow motion, each second now carrying the weight of meaning. Viewers remember why they clicked, but stay for why it matters. Because this wasn't just politics. It was proof that grace can still command a room, that dignity isn't weakness, it's power with purpose. The camera pulls back from the hearing room, panning out to reveal a country divided, scrolling, reacting, choosing sides. But through the noise, one truth keeps echoing. Composure is courage. It's the refusal to be dragged into chaos, even when chaos demands attention. As the music builds, text fades in across the screen. Be part of the movement for composure in chaos. The narrator's tone sharpens, shifting from reflection to rallying call. If you believe strength isn't about shouting louder, but standing firmer, if you believe grace is a kind of power the world has forgotten, then share this moment. The clip freezes once more, Bondi's words hanging in the air like a signature. Because silence, the narrator concludes, still speaks louder than noise. The logo fades in. Hashtag scroll beneath the frame. Hashtag grace is strength. Hashtag composure in chaos. Hashtag Bondi moment. The screen turns black. A heartbeat sound punctuates the silence. Then, one final whisper. Dignity triumphs over arrogance every time.